I want to do something different today. I want to see just how fast I can transform this box of sprues into this fully assembled, ready to paint model. So just how quickly can you build a Tamiya kit? Let's find out. All right, here it is. Tamiya's latest armor model, the 35th scale M36 Jackson tank destroyer. Now, normally this would be modeling madness, but this isn't just any kit. It's a Tamiya. It's the gold standard. It's known for its perfect fit, smart design, and instructions so clear it practically builds the model for you. All right, the clock is ticking, so let's start gluing. The first part here is the lower hull, and it's really simple. Now, this isn't the old school bathtub hull you get with some models. There's actually a few different parts that go together. There's only 4 pieces for the base part of the hull. The 2 sides, the bottom, and then the fighting compartment bottom that you pop into there. They go together really easy. It's really nicely marked. Now, I did make one mistake here, and I'm not going to reveal it just yet because we're going to get to it a little bit later and show you how I fixed it. After the base part of the lower hull is done, it's time to start working on the differential cover. Again, pretty straightforward here. You've got the toe shackles you put on there. There's one on each side of the front differential cover. There's a little small bar that goes onto the, and you can kind of see it here, that goes onto the side of the cover and then attaches to the toe shackles. Be really careful here. It's super easy to put on, and because it's Tamiya, it's got 2 nice little grooves where it fits right in, but it's a small part. It's easy to lose, so just kind of, a fair warning there. The rear panel is pretty straightforward too. Everything fits nicely into place. Not a lot of little parts here. You've got the exhaust, you've got the toe shackles on the back, you've got the deflector that you put together, and a few different pieces that goes on there. Again, super easy to put together. Glue it into place, and that's pretty much it. The lower hull's really easy here, but it still took me 34 minutes to do this. That's cutting it off the sprue, sanding it down, and everything. So I'm definitely not going to meet my initial goal when I set out of 2 hours for this because I'm already over half an hour into it. But I still feel good about where we are. We can still, I think we can still beat the clock here. All right, now here's where things are going to slow down a little bit. We've got 6 bogies to put together, 2 drive sprockets, and 2 idler wheels. Now the drive sprockets and the idler wheels are pretty straightforward. There's only 3 pieces for each one of those. Now the bogies are made up of a few different parts. You've got the road wheels. You've got the suspension arms that go onto the road wheels. Moving up from there, and now these are each 2 parts. So you've got a front suspension arm and a back suspension arm on each bogie. Same way with the bogie housing. You've got the front and back part of the bogie housing before you get to the top part where you have to then attach the return roller. It's all pretty straightforward, and it's not as many parts as some kits do for Sherman bogies like this. You do have to pay attention to what you're doing because the bogies are oriented for both the right and left sides of the vehicle, and if you put them together wrong, they're going to be backwards when you go to put them on the AFV itself. Sometimes with the wheels and the return rollers on a bogie, you get kind of some intrusive seam lines on those. These did not have that. What little sanding there was to do with these was pretty easy to take care of. Very minimal work. What I usually try to do with wheels on a tank or an AFV is cut them all off the sprue, sand them up, and get them ready to go in kind of an assembly line production format. I did that a little bit here, but the fact of the matter is you still have to put them together and you still have to make sure they're put together correctly. That took a lot longer than I thought it would. And even for a pretty simple Tamiya assembly process, I still spent 54 minutes getting the bogies cut off, sanded, put together, as long with the idler wheels, drive sprockets, getting them glued onto the hull. 54 minutes. Clock's ticking and the tracks are up next. One thing you'll notice with this model kit, if you've built Tamiya's M10, you've built the hull on this. The chief difference here is the turret, and one other thing, the tracks. And I think with the M10, it came with those rubber vinyl tracks. But here you've got Lincoln length tracks, and in true Tamiya fashion, they fit perfectly. They're nicely done. There's not a lot of sanding. They go together beautifully. But there's a really nice thing here. They've got grooves in them that fit onto a little piece that juts out on the very front return roller. And that's kind of handy because it helps you line up the tracks exactly where they need to be so you can start building off of those. So I started with the top part, and then I built up the bottom part with the small pieces and tried to wrap it around like that. I wish I had built up piece by piece on the wheels rather than trying to build that bottom part with the individual track links that come off of it and then wrap it around the wheels. I think you're just going to get a better fit that way with these kind of tracks because they're precision engineered for this. Another thing I did here was I went ahead and glued the idler wheel on. I wish I had left it unglued at least until I got the tracks done because it didn't give me the flexibility to make the adjustment here. So I did wind up with some very, very small gaps in the top part of the tracks. But that's okay because as you'll see later, when the top part of the hull goes on, it obscures that and you can't see those gaps at all. Still, I wish I'd done it differently. Lesson learned for next time. Something to be aware of if you are building this kit. Well, the good news is the tracks did not take as long as it did to do all the bogies and the idler wheel and the drive sprockets. However, it did take me 40 minutes to do these Lincoln length tracks. Now you got to be really careful. So you do want to take your time here. This is definitely not a spot where you want to rush through it, but 40 minutes. And I'm now in this thing for 2 hours and 8 minutes. The upper hull is the next part here. And this is where I had my first encounter with the carpet monster. You've got to insert these hinge parts for the hatch top where it slides into. And right away, one of those popped out on my tweezers and onto the floor. Fortunately, it was pretty easy to recover. The carpet monster didn't steal too much time here. After you get those parts for the hatches done on the inside, it sends you to the back of the upper hull and you put the back plate on there where some of the accessories and tools are going to attach. And then you had to put the bulkhead in there. Now that in some models, the bulkhead firewall thing kind of tends to be part of the lower hull, but here it goes onto the upper hull and attaches beautifully when you put the two pieces together further on down the line. There are some nice details on it. After the bulkhead, you've got the sponsons, and inside the sponsons, you've got those little ammunition holders on there. Again, those are pieces that are going to have to be painted down the line. I thought about leaving those separate and painting them individually before attaching them to the rest of the hull, but I decided against it because once you get them in there, I feel pretty confident in my ability to get in there with a paintbrush and do it anyway. And with the sponsons in place, the next part is the side skirts. Now, I've had models before where a side skirt can be a total headache and it throws out the alignment on the whole damn hull. But it doesn't in this case. It's just slots right in there. It's super, super easy. And like a part that can take you a long time to get right with other models, it took me 4 minutes with sanding on this Tamiya kit to do that. All right, flip it over, and then we've got to start getting some of the small pieces onto the upper hull. Now, the first thing to do is you've got a bunch of little parts, the auxiliary armor bosses that go on the side. There's at least a dozen of these things, and you got to be really careful when you cut them off the sprue. So what I did is I cut them off over an empty half of the box so that they could just fall into the box and I wouldn't lose those things. If those things get in the carpet, forget about it. They're gone. And they're kind of hard to cover up if you do lose one of them. And there's no extras. So headlights, auxiliary armor bosses, all pretty straightforward. It goes right on, goes right into place, pretty easy on there. That part took me about 12 minutes. Then after you put 5 different fuel caps on the back part of the upper hull, you go to the grousers. And the grousers are really straightforward to attach on the side. Grousers are little attachments that were made to go onto the tracks to help give the vehicle extra traction in the snow and mud and things like that. But these are pretty easy. You just cut them off the sprue, do a little bit of sanding and stick them onto the side. They fit on beautifully. It's no problem whatsoever. After the grousers, you've got a couple different parts here that can kind of be a headache on some of the other kits you build, some of the other brands of models, I should say. So you've got the headlight covers and then the grab handles kind of above them on the front part of the hull. Now with some brands, those headlight covers break super easy. They're made of very brittle plastic, but not in this case. They're super sturdy, they cut off the sprue beautifully, and they go right into place. I can see maybe where especially with other brands where they are so delicate, where the advantage comes in to get the upgrade kit and have the photo etch versions of those. But I don't feel like that's necessary here. I do think there are some parts with this kit where you would be better off with some upgrades, but I haven't gotten to them yet. And when I do, I'll point it out to you. So the upper hull does have a lot of little small parts that you've got to put on there, and be careful when you do it. But it's pretty easy except for one part of it, and that's the extra track length. With the extra track links, what you've got to do is you've got 3 different links, and they go into 2 little plates on the top and bottom. And the hard part here is to get them set in there and lined up nicely. And even for Tamiya, this was difficult. What I finally ended up doing was I put one of the bases on its side on the bench, glued the 3 pieces of track in there, let those dry just a little bit, still with some flexibility in case I needed to move them around when I put the other side on there. And then once I got the other side on there, I set them aside, let them dry a little bit, and then attach them to the vehicle. It took me about 20 minutes to get those little extra track pieces built and onto the vehicle. The hatches are nicely detailed and they go together really well, and they fit right into the top part of the hull. Easy peasy. You do have the option to leave those open if you want. I did not. I went ahead and closed mine. And with that part done, we're moving on to the back of the hull, and that's pretty straightforward. You've got your tools that go on there, the shovel, the sledgehammer, the tail lights, the grab handles, that kind of stuff. All fits into place really smooth and really easy. There was some sanding as you cut the tools and stuff off the sprues, and I do think this is one of those areas where you would benefit from some aftermarket upgrades, particularly with the clips and attachment points for the tools on here. It's just going to give you a little bit more detail than I think you get with just the base plastic on this one. All right, so with that, the upper hull is done. Time-wise, I'm sitting at 3 hours and 33 minutes. We've got the turret left to go. I don't anticipate that taking a long time to do, but we'll see. So can I get this done in under 5 hours? That's the next benchmark. The first step with the turret is the lower basket part, where the gunner and the loader are going to sit with this thing. There's a lot of little parts when you look at the instructions, but they just go together so beautifully that I got that lower basket part of the turret done in 12 minutes. With all that put together, the next part is the interior part of the upper turret. Got some nicely detailed parts on this too. You can kind of see the little rod kit that goes on the top. You got the little scope for sighting. You've got some canteens that go in there, little pouches that go on the side. Nicely detailed little kit on the turret here. One criticism of Tamiya is that it's just not as detailed as some of the other manufacturers out there. And I guess that's true to some extent. But as you can kind of see from the inside of the turret here, you do get a lot of nice little details in here that you can still see with the turret put together. And that's not always the case with some of the other kits that you buy, some of the other brands that you buy. There's a lot of little detailed parts in it that you will never, ever, ever be able to see once the model's all put together. And again, just like the lower part of the turret, this just goes together beautifully. Sometimes when you got the 2 halves of the turret like you do here, the fit can be a little janky. Not in this case. It fits together perfectly. There's no gaps. I mean, I think I had to use a total of sprue goo on gap filling on this model once in the whole process. And it was really insignificant. I can't even tell you now in hindsight where that was. After that part of the turret's done, the next step is the shell racks that go in kind of the back part of the turret. You do have 11 of the little kind of covers for where the ammo goes into it. Do be careful with those and watch the orientation. They all have to be oriented a certain way in order to fit. Again, because it's Tamiya, it's kind of idiot proof, but you could still mess it up, I think, if you wanted to. And once you get those 2 shell racks put together and attached to each other, you just slide it right into the counterweight and pop it onto the back of the turret. And that's almost it for the turret. The next step here is going to be the gun. Separating this part of the turret out from the gun itself, 39 minutes. Not bad at all. Now, the gun itself with some kits can be really time consuming because, again, this is, like I said earlier, this is one of those spots with some brands where you get a lot of little detailed parts that are a pain in the ass to fit together. and you're not ever going to see them anyway, but you kind of need some of them at least to be exactly in place because it determines the fit for the rest of the piece. That's not the case with the Tamiya. You do have some small parts, but it goes together really well. And there are grooves and slots for the little parts in here, so there's no guesswork as to exactly where they're supposed to go. This part, the first part of the gun is the breech. Like I say, with the small parts, they just slide right into place. Then you put the two top and bottom halves of the back of the gun together and slide the breech right into it. There's a few small parts to be mindful of here. Be really careful when you're cutting them off the sprue. But like I said earlier, they just slide right into place perfectly. The next step is to slide that part into the top part of the turret. But here's where I made a mistake. Well, actually, I didn't make a mistake. I lost the poly caps that I needed for this thing. Now, sometimes with the wheels, the poly caps aren't such a big deal if you're not going to do a movable suspension system. But you absolutely have to have the poly caps for this part, let me tell you. I tried to do it without the poly caps because I couldn't find them. It turns out I just dropped them on the floor. But I tried to do it without the caps, and it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't hold together. And when you went to put it into the turret itself, it wouldn't stay. It wouldn't line up correctly. It was a mess. So what I did was I went and grabbed poly caps out of the Tamiya Brumbar kit that I had. I did end up finding the poly cap I needed later on down the line. So I just put those back with the Brumbar, and I'll have those when I need them, whenever I go to put the Brumbar together. You've got to have those poly caps. And then once you do, it just drops right into place beautifully on the upper hull. Now this comes with a plastic barrel. And sometimes plastic barrels are kind of a pain in the butt because they get those nasty seam lines. This one had those seam lines, but I have to say they cleaned up so easily. Just the faintest touch with a sanding stick and they were gone. There was no extra divots. There were no, weird flat parts from over sanding it or anything. It was just really easy to do. I still think you could justify a metal barrel upgrade here if you can find one. I think they did because this is a new kit, there's not a lot of aftermarket parts specific to the Tamiya M36, but they do. I think there's a metal barrel out there for the Academy kit, M36 kit, but you just got to kind of make sure it fits before you commit to it. Few more small parts that go onto the counterweight on the back of the turret. Again, super easy. There's little slots to help you fit them exactly where they're supposed to go. No hassle whatsoever. And the last part of the turret is the one that I was most concerned about. It's those handles that go along the top part of each side. And with some kits, those kind of things can be very delicate. They break really easy. And a lot of times there's not really a clear guide as to where they go on the hull. So you run into like alignment problems and things like that. With the Tamiya, they just snip right off the sprue. Super easy. And they go right into place. There's little grooves for where they go. Tamiya's made it nice and easy. They just slot right in. All right, and with those handles on the side, all we have to do is pop in the barrel, and we are completely done with the turret. Time-wise, the turret took 1 hour and 22 minutes. A little longer than I'd wanted. Time-wise, for the whole kit so far, we're still under 5 hours, but barely. 4 hours, 55 minutes. All that's left now is the 50 caliber machine gun and the tow cable. And now the tow cable is going to be a little tricky. The 50 caliber is pretty straightforward. It goes together quick and easy, no problem. But the tow cable was a little bit of a complicating factor here. A lot of kits will give you the nylon string for a tow cable, and I hate that stuff. It never fits correctly into the ends of the tow cable, and it just doesn't look very good when you get on the tank. And I think the thing to do with all tow cables, if you can, is to find an upgrade aftermarket part for it. Just get an actual wire cable for it. This tow cable is a 4-piece unit. They're cut in half and they kind of go on top of each other like that, so it leaves it fairly seamless. And it does leave it pretty seamless. I was pleasantly surprised by that. The tow cable actually has to connect to the bottom part of the tow cable on the lower hull. So my plan was to leave the lower hull and the upper hull unattached so that I could paint the insides of them. But in order to get this tow cable together, you can't do that. You can't just put the one piece of tow cable on the lower hull and the other 3 pieces of tow cable on the upper hull, because once you get those painted, you do have to kind of fiddle around with it to get the alignment correct. So it's kind of either glue it in place or wait and come back to it with an aftermarket part, which I wish I had done in hindsight. Now, the tow cable itself is not hard to do, and I do think it looks a lot better than the nylon string you get with a lot of kits, but you have to make some compromises to get it together. There's one other little glitch I ran into here. I went to put the turret on and it didn't quite fit into place, and I couldn't quite figure out what was going on with it at first. Looking a little closer, I realized that I put the bottom part of the fighting compartment in the lower hull backwards. So you have this little part that sticks up on that, and I had that in the wrong place, and it wouldn't let the turret go all the way down into it. It was a pretty easy fix. I just had to cut that part out, brute force and an X-Acto knife. Not ideal, but you can't see it once the turret's in there. So I can still get this thing weathered and painted on the inside. And even though there is a gaping hole in there, it's not something that you're going to be able to see with the kit all put together. So time-wise, we finished this 5 hours, 15 minutes. I think that's probably the lower end of normal for putting together a Tamiya kit. Even if you slowed your pace a little bit and did it, say, in like 7 hours or something like that, this is still a weekend project, an easy weekend project. All told, this is a great kit. I really like it. I think it's fun to build. It goes together so well. Working against the clock puts a little sweat on your brow as you're building this thing, but ultimately it's a pretty easy process. And that's why I love Tamiya models. It's a stress-free build that takes you through that part of it really fast and gets you into the painting and weathering, which for me is the fun part of this. Now, before you leave, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. I'm Ryan. You're watching Sprue Goo. Stay tuned for more modeling content.